The Boston Bruins defeated the Toronto Maple Leafs in Game 7 of their first-round playoff series last night. In this video, we're going to recap the series and look to see what's ahead for both clubs. And that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams. So if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So the Boston Bruins defeated the Toronto Maple Leafs in Game 7 last night to complete the first round of the NHL Playoffs here in 2018. It was a 7-game series that was a tremendous, fun, entertaining hockey to watch. As I mentioned in our preview playoff videos before the playoffs ever started, I said this was the series I'd probably want to keep my eye on the most, as I thought it would have the most entertainment value, some of the best hockey, and it had the potential to go 7 games, so there'd probably be the most games to watch as well. So I don't think it disappointed at all. There was a lot of good stories in this series, lots of good hockey, lots of entertainment. So let's do a quick recap here. We'll take a look game by game, kind of analyze what happened, what went down, and what allowed the Bruins to be a little bit more successful here to pull off this Game 7 victory against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, obviously, I don't need to remind Leaf fans that this is like watching a movie over again with the same ending, whereas obviously 2013, it was a little bit different, but sort of the same approach. In Game 7, the Leafs go into the third period with a lead and unfortunately come up short. Your team has a lot of bright young players, and there's nothing but the sky's the limit here for this Toronto Maple Leafs organization. I'm sure that in years ahead here, we're going to see them have a lot more success moving forward. Obviously, Toronto had a tremendous NHL season this year, record for points in a season by that organization. They got nothing to be ashamed of. Obviously, they have work to do like every other club. If you don't win the Stanley Cup, you're not quite there, and you obviously have things to work on in order to get better and get there, and we'll get into that here momentarily. So obviously this series started with Boston having home ice advantage. The Bruins ended up winning the first game by a score of 5-1. A little bit lopsided. Shots were 40-27 in favor of the Bruins. The Bruins ended up going 3 for 6 on the power play, where the Leafs were 0 for 3. So obviously, really Boston kind of dominated pretty well all aspects of the game. Their power play was clicking at a 50% rate, whereas the Leafs couldn't take advantage. At the same time, they were doing better 5-on-5, generating more shots. Tuukka Rask had a pretty solid game for the Bruins. Freddie Anderson didn't play terribly, but couldn't steal one for the Leafs in this one. Bruins go up 1-0. Game 2 again in Boston. We have a 7-3 Boston victory. They take a 2-0 series lead. The shots were a little bit closer. The Leafs actually outshot the Bruins 33-28. Boston again had a solid power play, 2 for 4, where the Leafs were 1 for 4. So the Bruins with a slight edge again in special teams. But obviously a big edge on the scoreboard. A lot of that come from 5-on-5 play. That top line of the Bruins with Bergeron, Marchand, and Pastrnak, they were absolutely dominating the Leafs, and they put up a ton of points in those first 2 games. And that was one of the major differences. They were certainly exploiting that Leafs defense for sure, and getting lots of opportunities and taking advantage of them. Now, of course, Game 3 shifts back to Toronto. This was pretty much a do-or-die game, even though they technically wouldn't have been eliminated. The Leafs go down 3-0. That's an incredibly deep hole to claw back from. And I figured as well that the Leafs would put forth an effort on home ice and get back in the series, and they did not disappoint. The Leafs go up with a 4-2 victory here. Boston outshot them though, 42-30. Frederik Andersen played a tremendous game. We've finally seen very little opportunities on the power play for either team. Each of them only had 1. Toronto capitalized on theirs. Boston did not. So that could have, in a lot of ways, was the difference. Obviously, that power play goal, if they wouldn't have capitalized there, that might have changed the game. So special teams edge here goes to the Leafs. I think Frederik Andersen played a tremendous game and helped them seal this victory. Obviously, Toronto's getting, at this point in the series, they're getting, their scoring is coming from different areas. Their top line of Nylander, Matthews, and stuff, they're not playing terribly, but they're not putting up a lot of points. They're getting goals from Marleau and JVR. Other players like Brown, Bozak are all contributing. Kasperi Kapanen, I thought, had a tremendous series as well, and I look forward to seeing what he can do going forward. Game 4 back in Toronto. Boston comes back with a 3-1 victory and also takes a 3-1 series lead. Now, this is a game that Toronto really needed to get things squared up, and they couldn't quite get there. Toronto actually outshot the Bruins quite a bit, 32-21. A lot of opportunities for the Leafs, but they just couldn't get the goals to go in for them. Again, not too many opportunities on the power play. Boston didn't have any. Toronto had 1, and they were 0 for 1. So special teams here really wasn't much of an impact. Very few penalties called in this game. but obviously Toronto had more shots, but Boston had more goals. So I mean, obviously it was a case, just a close game, hard-fought game, but the Leafs just couldn't get the offense rolling to get some better opportunities to go in the net, and they go down 3-1 to the Bruins. So obviously Game 5, heading back to Boston. Boston's looking to wrap this up, but we don't expect the Leafs to go down here without a fight. They pull off a 4-3 Toronto victory, even though Boston greatly outshot them 45-21. Frederik Andersen was by far the top star in this game. Definitely, without Freddie playing a solid game, the series was over. I think, in my opinion, I mean, obviously there was a close game on the scoreboard. Without that goaltending, I think the Leafs probably go down here. But they got that goaltending from Freddie, and he kept them in it. Boston was 1 for 6 in the power play. Toronto getting only 1 for 1. Game 6 back in Toronto. Obviously, this is another opportunity for the Bruins to wrap things up, but they don't get it done. Toronto comes up big with a 3-1 victory. Frederik Andersen again was by far the Leafs' best player in my opinion. Boston outshot Toronto 33-30. Neither one of them scored a power play goal. Boston was 0 for 2. Toronto was 0 for 3. So at the end of the day here, it was really 1-5-on-5. Toronto really grinded this one out. Andersen again, like by far, was the main reason that this game went to where it was. I know Andersen might not have been at his best in the first couple games, but in that middle part of the series where they clawed back in to make it 3-3, I don't think you can give Freddie too much grief because he battled hard, kept them in it, and he won those games for Toronto, in my opinion. So Frederik Andersen had a great series overall. It's too bad he couldn't have come up bigger in Game 7. Obviously, now we'll move on to Game 7. Bruins up with a 7-4 victory. The final goal was into the empty net. Obviously, the Leafs go into the third period with a 4-3 lead. Mike Babcock said he was happy with where the team was at. But it's a little bit surprising in a way because all year long, Mike Babcock's been trying to work on their defensive play. And even though they had a lead going into the third period, it kind of felt like it was a track meet and there was a race, back and forth race in the run and gun style of hockey. And that's really not the Leafs. As much as they have a lot of offense, they don't have the defense to really get into that type of track meet. And it really cost them. Obviously, Jake Gardiner didn't have a tremendous game. He was -5 on the night. His post-game comments were that it's the biggest game of the year and he didn't show up. Those were his words, not mine. So I'd be curious to hear from Leaf fans. What were your thoughts on Jake Gardiner? Obviously, he was on the ice for a lot of goals. There was a lot of talk around that Jake DeBrusk goal. Personally, I don't think you can put too much blame there on Gardiner for how he played it. It obviously would have been helpful if he could have got that stick in there to try to poke check the puck off of DeBrusk's stick. But really, I think that goal, more of the blame is on Andersen. It's kind of a soft goal that he needs to have. But I'd be really curious just to hear the Leafs' perspective on Jake Gardiner, just to see what their thoughts were on his game. Obviously, statistically speaking, it wasn't good at all. But I know there are some Gardiner fans out there that would probably like an opportunity to state his case. And I know there's lots of Leaf fans as well that are kind of unhappy with his defensive play because it's really has proven not to be very reliable on the defensive end. So I'd like to see either side of the coin here, your thoughts on Jake Gardiner's play. If you look back, 2013 was another case where the Bruins went into the third period down in Game 7 on home ice, just like this. Came back. It was a little bit different scenario. They were down 3 versus down 1. A little bit different outcome, but sort of the same narrative in a way. It's like watching a bad movie and you watch it again and the ending doesn't change and you're just as disappointed the second time around. So I'm sure for Leaf fans this stings. Obviously, like I said, the Leafs have a tremendous young core of players that have a ton of potential. I'd be also very curious to hear from Leaf fans on the performance of Austin Matthews. I've heard, again, a variety of opinions out there on social media and in the media, mainstream media, regarding his play or lack thereof. I mean, obviously, I know he didn't put up much. He scored 1 goal and had 1 assist for 2 points in 7 games. So statistically speaking, if you're just looking at the score sheet, it looked like he didn't show up. But at the same time, I watched every one of these games, and I can say that he did play really hard. He had a lot of opportunities. He didn't obviously bury as many as I'm sure he would like and Leaf fans would have liked. But I don't think his play was really all that bad. The Bruins' top line of Patrice Bergeron obviously often gets matched up against the other top players. So playing against that line was really hard for Matthews. Obviously, as much as you want to, some people might want to give him some flack for not performing higher to a higher standard. You have to give the Bruins credit as well for shutting him down. But at the same time, he did generate a lot of opportunities. And I don't think, at least from the eye test perspective, I don't think his play was all that bad. But he certainly didn't have any games at all where he was that dominating top player that I'm sure everybody would love and expect him to be. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on Austin Matthews' performance as well, because there also, again, seems to be quite a variety of opinions floating around out there. So I'd like to hear the argument for both sides of the coin. Personally, I don't think he played all that bad. Would have been nice to see him get on the score sheet more, absolutely. But at the same time, I understand he was playing a lot against that Bergeron line. And, you know, they are a tremendous shutdown line as well as the offensive line. They go both sides of the coin. Bergeron and Marchand can play a lot, you know, shorthanded 5-on-5 power play. They really do it all and do it all very, very well. So it is a tough assignment. So I'm not going to give him too much flack for his lack of points. But obviously at the same time, that certainly did play a role in why Boston come out ahead, as they were able to neutralize the Matthews line and not allow them to get too many points. I thought Mitch Marner was tremendous for Toronto. I think between Marner and Marleau, they're by far their top two forwards. I think really for me though, Marner was their top forward. He really impressed me a lot with his play and offensive abilities. So that's, you know, I know Marner kind of had a little bit of a slower start to the season, but really that second half of the year and into the playoffs, he had a tremendous performance. So I think that the Leafs have a really bright future there with Mitch Marner. He's a tremendous hockey player with a lot of offensive talents, so you should be very pleased about that. So obviously the big thing for the Leafs though is they need to get better their defense score has to improve. I mean, Gardner and Zaitsev just really didn't have great series defensively. Overall though, I think in order for the Leafs to take the next step, I really think they need an extra defenseman or two that can play a better two-way game. Travis Dermott at times looked great offensively, but he also looked very weak defensively as well. I do think the kid's got a bright future. I've seen a lot of good things out of Dermott this year, so I'll be curious to see how he develops, but I think the potential is there. So I mean, really, for his first playoff run, you can't give him too much flack either. So a lot of these Leaf players are young. Obviously, they're going to lean hard on their veterans moving into next year. You know, have we seen the last of JVR, Tyler Bozak, Leo Komarov? Obviously, Komarov barely played in the playoffs due to injury. You know, Bozak and JVR, are they going to be back? Hard to say. In the coming days here, we're going to be putting out a series of videos doing a seasonal recap for each team. We're going to start with the teams that missed the playoffs and work our way into the teams that lost out here in the first round, and we'll keep completing them as team seasons come to an end. So stay tuned for that. If you haven't done so already, we launched a 1,000 subscriber giveaway as well as another contest. If you'd like to enter and you haven't had a chance to watch that video yet, it's linked down in the description. It's called the 1,000 subscriber giveaway. So check that out for full details so you can take part in this contest. If you haven't done so already, consider following us on Twitter. You're going to find our Twitter handle here on the screen right here. It's also linked in the description. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We'll catch you next time.